This is another episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC, celebrating 40-plus years on the fringe of show business. Stories, interviews, and comedy sets from the famous and not so famous. Here's your host and MC, Scott Edwards.
Ladies and gentlemen, I got another fun show for you. Man, this guy is so funny, such a good friend. He has been part of the podcast previously. He has done a comedy roundtable. He's had his own personal interview, but I wanted to check back with him because there's a lot going on. Ladies and gentlemen, he was recently at the Just for Laughs Comedy Festival. He's been on Conan O'Brien's show. He was a regular at my club for years and one of the stars and writers of the very popular Marijuana Logs that appeared on Broadway. Ladies and gentlemen, help me welcome Tony Camin. Tony, so great.
Thank you, Scott. I didn't know there were so many people listening in the studio audience over there.
It's incredible.
I hear the crowd going crazy.
When they heard you were going to be on the show, they all wanted to be here. Tony Camin, one of the funniest guys ever. You do stand-up comedy. You've done plays. You've done so many exciting things. How's the comedy world treated you?
Oh, like an ex-wife, I guess. No, I don't know. I've had good times. Yeah, it's been a real fun life. I can't complain. One of my earliest journeys in this life was going to Laugh Unlimited when you used to come down and check out the acts in San Francisco, and that's how I met you. And those are some of those Laugh Unlimited years that were still some of my fondest, and I thank you for that.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And it was such a joy to have you on my stage, and the audience has always loved you. And ladies and gentlemen, when this airs, Tony will have been doing a comedy tour of England. I know that'll be exciting for you. But one of the things I wanted to chat about was you've had that unique experience of getting started in the San Francisco comedy scene, but you moved to Los Angeles for show business reasons, and you're a strong part of the comedy scene down there. Just in a quick, short answer, what are the differences?
Well, I think mainly it's stage time. I think stage time is so much better in San Francisco. People always move down here, and I think they do it too early. You know, when I moved down, I had already done Conan, and I've been some festivals and stuff. So I thought I was ready to move, but people move down here, move so fast, and then they can't get stage time because no one knows who they are. It's like even big names in the San Francisco world or in, they come down here and they struggle. So I think San Francisco was a great place to develop, and LA is just tougher, that nowadays in every city, there's more of a under market where it's like you'd have the main clubs like yours or the Punchline in San Francisco. But there's so many comics now that people have started their own clubs and their own nights at bars and whatnot. And that's probably the majority of the stuff now in cities isn't the main comedy club. It's the little, it's a little thing usually run by comics and stuff, because of the gatekeeping has been so tight that the people have started their own. So there's a lot of like cafe shows here, but I think the stage time overall is better in smaller markets and stuff in like New York and in LA. It's just more competitive. I would say that's the main thing is you got everybody here. If you've heard of them, they either live in New York or LA, and that's who your stage time is still limited. So you're fighting. In LA, you're fighting Bill Burr and all those types for stage time at the big clubs. Where at your home club, you could be a bigger name faster. So my take is I have such a fondness for San Francisco and Northern California, where I started, because I just had more stage time. And I think maybe even the audiences in general aren't in show business. Like sometimes you get these industry showcases here, or you just people in general. It's a big industry in Los Angeles and Hollywood. That's what people do. Even if they're not actors, they might be even accountants for studios, or they work in the industry in some capacity. So I think maybe the audiences I like an audience that doesn't know better. I like
a little less jaded.
Normal. I like normal working people, as opposed to industry people. I think most comics do because they talk about life, and industry people tend to want to hear show business jokes and stuff like that. So
That's interesting.
I have a preference, I guess, for Northern California, overall.
Well,
but it's the reality of the business that you have to be down here for something.
Right. And I think you brought up so many good points that just to give the audience a little background, you and I both came up in the 80s. I was a producer. You were a comic. I was exposed to stand-up comedy by visiting a satellite room for the Comedy Store and saw what it could offer, and then brought that to my small town. And so my club, even though it was an A room, was in Sacramento. So there was no chance of some director or producer or somebody from Hollywood seeing you, and it was so freeing for the comics. But when you started in San Francisco, we're talking about clubs like the Holy City Zoo, Cobb's Comedy Corner, the Punchline. There was 6 or 8 rooms that you could do a walk on and get stage time. And as we both know, whether you're an amateur or professional, it's all about getting stage time.
Yeah, I mean, you can't duplicate having people in front of you, having a few people in front of you in your house. You can't. That's why people, Louis C.K., Bill, they do all these sets everywhere you can, because you just can't replicate that. You need people in front of you, and it's wherever you can get it. Optimally, it's a nice comedy club, but sometimes it's a cafe, sometimes it's a bar, sometimes it's a jail cell. Wherever you can gather up a few people. That it's a symbiotic relationship. A crowd, you need a crowd for comedy.
Right, and I think that's why we're in this art form, is that immediate response. Unlike watching TV or going to a movie or going to a play where you sit quietly and then maybe show your feelings towards it at the end with applause or no applause. Comedy, it's every 10 seconds there's something happening and you want an interaction with the audience. In those early days, I mean, the Zoo is just famous for being, for those that haven't heard in previous podcasts, it was a room that sat maybe 24 to 30 people. It had a stage the size of a postage stamp. There was a balcony seat that held, I think, 3 people. But people like Robin Williams and Will Durst and yourself, Dana Carvey, got their start on this little teeny club where anybody could go up.
Yeah, and everybody, and most of the people were very good. Like you said, Robin Williams, Greg Proops, Jake Johansson, all these people were really already at a certain level. So I lived near San Jose at the time, so I'd drive up because the comedy was better. You want to bring yourself up when you're starting. You want to be surrounded by better comics. So the Zoo had that, in a very intimate, as you pointed out, very intimate setting. You got good because you got good at crowd work. There's 40 people there. And everybody had to walk in front of the stage to go to the restroom, so it was just like it made your skills, like tough and your thing. If a joke didn't work, it was so obvious that these people sitting right in front of you were just staring at you. It was like, it just made you good. And then when you got to a bigger room, you go over the punchline of the Improv at the time, and you heard your joke get a laugh with maybe 200 people in it. I remember the first time I was like, whoa, this is okay. I see I see what I was working towards. You're making 60 people laugh is different than making 200,000 laugh, but it's the same skill that does that,
Right. And you learn those skills though in the smaller rooms and the open mics and those early developmental times that you get stage time. But, look at Cobb's. Wasn't that the one with the big glass pane glass window, I should say it right, that was open to the street? And
I think that was the other cafe.
That was the other cafe? Okay.
That was the other cafe. The old Cobb's was before my time. I started in 89, 88, late 80s. So yeah, I only was witness to the second incarnation of Cobb's, which was at the Cannery.
Oh, okay.
But
So
I think,
the other
I think
cafe was the one that had that big
the other
plain
cafe, yeah,
window, and the comics are trying to entertain people are driving by, walking by, looking in the window. I mean, talk about a distraction of the audience. You had to be a good comic to keep their attention.
oh yeah, and the comics I enjoyed would really use that. Kevin Meaney, he would just bark like a dog and chase the people in the window down the street, barking like crazy. Bob Rubin, all these great comics would really use that window. And then you took that as a skill. Just a few weeks ago, I did one of these rooftop shows, and there was a cop going by. So you going by, so I made fun of it because I got used to things happening. The chaos happening because of the window or from the Holy City Zoo. When things come up, you can address it. They're not shocking to you. You're like, I've had things thrown at me, and you get even that's helpful to have the big window, because you're like, oh, this isn't optimal, but not all gigs are, and when they aren't, I have, like you said, skills to handle it.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's to use a different metaphor, it's like building up a callus to bad situations and being able to deal with it without the pain of suffering through the entertainment, because you're getting all those nuances, all those interruptions, all those distractions that you learn to work through. Now, when you got to LA, and there's like the Comedy Magic Club, the improv, the Comedy Store, the Laugh Factory, those clubs were, in my mind, different than the San Francisco scene, because, as you said, the audiences are a little more jaded, the audiences are more Hollywood, but there's still a lot of successful comedy being born in LA, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I was more of an improv comic. I had, that's where my manager had relationships with, and it was a very famous club at the time. You had American Express commercials, but it's the improv, and they all had their different personality. They all had a different vibe to them, and they still do. But they're you look at these lists, and it's like, oh, I'm on with Drew Carey, and all these. You have to. You're like, I'm in this game. I have to be as good as I have for this crowd. I have to get them as laughing and try to do what I do, and not stick out amongst these great comics. I have to fit in. So it makes you work harder. Just like going from San Jose to San Francisco. Now you go to San Francisco to LA. It's another step in like trying to be like, undeniably you belong with these people. If you have to prove that, oh, I'm as good as these people. Like, but a crowd comes to a show like, oh, Jerry Seinfeld was great, but you were just as good. You have to. They might stick around to see the famous person, but you have to prove who you are too. So it's just another level of toughening up, sort of,
Yeah, and I think that, again, in almost a different way, but the same result, when you go from a smaller town and you're performing in a bar or something, and then you go to San Francisco, and then you have that level of comedy. It's not competition, but the peer group is different. But then you go to LA and everything is raised up. 2 points I wanted to share. One was, I used to tell comics all the time, and prepare them, that if you got really big or huge in a town like Boston or San Francisco, when you go to LA, it's like starting over. And then,
oh yeah.
And then two, when you're in Sacramento or San Jose, you can try new material. Even at the Zoo and some of the smaller clubs in the city, San Francisco, you can play a little bit and experiment and try material. However, as you kind of alluded to, when you get to LA, even if it's an off night, you never know who's in the audience, and you could be on stage with Seinfeld or Drew Carey. You have to bring your game.
Yeah. The road, I had almost an opposite experience. The road made me tougher and more tight, and I would come back to San Francisco, say on a Monday night after work in the road, and I almost felt not hacky, but like my delivery was too rigid, and hey, and I would loosen up and try new things on the showcase nights in the town I lived. That's what those were for, the Monday nights where you could do 10-minute spots. That's where I would try stuff, or in the middle of a set on the road. After I felt comfortable, because you go on the road, they don't know you. You want to do your best at first to prove that, oh, I belong. You didn't make a mistake hiring me for this week. But by the weekend, you can sort of, even though the bigger crowds come in, I feel you feel comfortable enough where you have your spots to try some new stuff. But I always thought the Monday, Sunday night showcases back home were where I would try new things and then take battle toughened bits that I've worked on. Those were ones where like, if they make the road act, and then they're like they got a passing grade, after trying them out on the showcase nights,
Yeah. So you are explaining it kind of the opposite I was thinking. I understand that when you go on the road, you have to prove yourself, and so you bring out your A material.
But I was coming back to San Francisco. I wasn't coming back to Los Angeles. That's a big difference.
Right, because in Los Angeles, you always have to kind of be cognizant of who and where you are, right?
Yeah, what people don't remember is like San Francisco is still the road. Unless you're in New York or LA, it's the road. That the industry is not located there. So even if I lived in San Francisco, but it was still the road to the greater industry. So also another reason not to leave too soon is because you come back from Kansas City and you got you did your half hour, you did your hour, and now you feel freer because I'm not getting paid at the showcase. It's a fun Monday night. I'm back home with my buddies. I'm going to try a couple things that I started in Kansas City. I'm going to flesh them out here. But it's generally a looser feel. You don't feel as like, oh, I'm getting paid for this. I got to do a good job. I have 200 people I got to attend. You're like, I'm working on stuff. It's a Monday night. I'm not getting paid. So it's a little freer. But then that's San Francisco. That's Boston. That's not New York or LA,
That's interesting because for me being in Sacramento, San Francisco was more of a comedy hub, kind of like Seattle and Boston. You're right. It's not the same as the show business centers that New York or hubs that New York and LA are. But they compared to Sacramento or San Jose or some other, Phoenix, Arizona, wherever there was some clubs, San Francisco was still a step up before LA, which was another step up. I always thought of Laughs Unlimited is an A room, but where people could work out stuff that they could take back to LA. A great story was Gary Shandling was going to do the Tonight Show, and he proved himself to the audience for about 15, 20 minutes, and then he stopped his show, and he told the audience, hey, I'm going to be on the Tonight Show next Wednesday. I need to try out some jokes. And he brought out 3x5 cards and just read them, and then made note of what worked and what didn't work. The audience loved it because it was like behind the scenes stuff. And then he went back to a set. But what was really exciting was the next Wednesday, he was on the Tonight Show and we got to hear the jokes he was working out on our stage. Well, that was a great story. It was a great moment in the history of Laughs Unlimited, but that's something you can't do in LA or New York. And I think would be unusual even in somewhere like San Francisco, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe San Francisco, like you said, was just another road gig.
Well, like you said, it depends on where you are and who you are. Like, Drew Carey could get up at the Improv and do 3x5 cards and no one would care. They'd be, oh, great. And like, the Comedy and Magic, Jay Leno's famous for going there on Sunday nights and working on his monologue. So it does happen here too. It's just what level you are, like you said, Laughs Unlimited was great because it was an A room in a B town. So it really so was.
That's so true. I never thought of that, but it's true. It was an A room. It was definitely a quality, top-notch headliner room, but it was definitely, I don't know about B. It might have been a C or a D town.
Yeah, I mean Cowtown, so maybe C town. Yeah, but so it was interesting because the club, especially in the first incarnation, it was just magic, and just because most people did well, it kind of brought you up again. It's kind of like how Comedy Magic is out here. Like the crowds are great, but like if you just had an okay set, which would have been okay somewhere else, or even good somewhere else, at your place, you had to, you could just, most nights you would just kill. So if you didn't, you knew you weren't doing something right because it was such a great room. I still hold that first club where, the audience started below you, but they ended above you. That rake you had in the
right
with the audience seating, that was just. I mean, there's one club, Downtown Comedy Works in Denver, has a similar thing, and it's a great room because when you're standing on stage, your eye line's almost in the middle of the crowd height wise, like the people below you, the people above you, but not too many. It's a very rare low ceiling. The whole thing was just a great setup, and it was such a good, fun 2 weeks in the earlier days because you had the Citrus Heights too, you know.
Yeah,
They were just
for the audience's edification,
great.
my club on Firehouse Alley that I opened in 1982 was low ceiling. It had a raised seating area that we had leveled seating, almost like an arena, and it really led itself to performance and entertainment. And then when I had to leave that room, which was a sorrowful thing that I had no control over, I was able to design my own club, but we didn't have the ability to, through the floor plan, raise the audience. So we had to do it through different sized tables, but it never had that same feeling. And thank you for saying, I think it was a great room for comedy, and it really worked well for a lot of up and coming talents like Seinfeld and Leno and Carvey and people like yourself, Karen Anderson, Arj Barker. I mean, a lot of people played that room, and it was really fun to be a part of that scene. But it's a
lot of people's favorites too, by the way. I mean, I don't know if they've expressed this. Sorry to interrupt. But like when people make clubs now, you know, it's rare that people, but like the improv's expanding and stuff, and you see these clubs that are always so big, and they always, you know, like your second incarnation, which was a beautiful club, but you couldn't get away from the fact that it had high ceilings. It was just a big old warehouse, former warehouse or whatever it was.
Right.
So I don't understand. I understand they want to make their money up with the big crowds on weekends with people from TV and stuff, and that leaves you with this giant room, you know, 80% of the time.
Isn't full.
Just too big. Yeah, so I like your room was just the perfect. So I'm like, oh, that should have been the benchmark for how you make a comedy club, in my opinion. You know.
Yeah, well, thank you for saying so, and I agree. I've been to clubs all over the country, and I always felt that the design that I put in that particular room was one of the best I ever saw. It was interesting too, because back in the 80s, there was still smoking allowed. This is before you in 1989, but in the early 80s, you could still smoke in a club, and we had that low ceiling, and we'd have a non-smoking section. It didn't matter. We're all breathing the same air.
Yeah, I started in there was sections. You know, that was always funny because, first of all, the smoking section was always the hotter section, not just temperature-wise, but audience goodness-wise. You know, the smoking section was always better laughers and everything. And also, you know, like you said, it was a ridiculous thing because smoke doesn't know when to stop. You know, I can't, I'm smoke. I'm not allowed in that part of the club. It just would go, yeah, it was a ridiculous thing. But, but I didn't, you know, it's one of those things when the smoking ban first happened, I was like, oh, come on, this is ridiculous, you know. But now everybody's, and I was like, oh, my clothes don't smell like cigarettes anymore after a week of work. Because you go in these clubs and they would just, you know, especially like Vegas or something, they would just smell like all my clothes reek of cigarettes. So that's one benefit of the non-smoking is my clothes don't smell so bad. But yeah, for some reason, I think of those audiences being hotter. I don't know why.
Well, I think that it goes with and of course, this is why casinos still allow smoking. People that smoke tend to drink more, or at least drink. And so when you're drinking, you're gambling. For comedy clubs back in the day, the people that were the smokers were the drinkers, and that's where you made a big lot of your money to pay for everything. So it was only when the government said, okay, there can't be any more smoking, that we were forced to do that, because we didn't want to give up the drinkers. But, you know, that was decades ago, and things are luckily better now. I'm actually asthmatic and didn't like all the smoke. And like you said, I hated smelling like smoke in all my clothes, but it was what was happening at the time. Now things are a little bit cleaner. But also, as I kind of alluded to, in some of the clubs that are being built now, they're almost too clean. It's like glass, high ceilings. The comedy gets lost. You know that.
Oh, I agree 100%. Like, I loved your club. Your club was nice, but there was like this club in Seattle called the Underground, Comedy Underground, that was in the basement of a sports bar, and it was gritty. And it was great. It was low ceiling. It was great. It was, it was a much smaller affair than your club. It was another, like, people, I don't think swanky, nice showrooms is conducive to comedy. I know that sounds weird. I don't know why. But I think people like to be comfortable when they laugh. And when that means if they have a drink in their hand, if they're smoking in the past, whatever it is, there's a big difference. I think a nice place is almost intimidating,
It's funny you mentioned that. The Comedy Underground was really just a garbage hole. I mean, it was dirty, it was smoky, it was small.
Yeah, definitely.
The stage was not that fancy. The lighting was, not that great. It didn't need great sound because it wasn't a huge room. And yet it was a great comedy room. And I think
it was great, yeah.
And I think you're right that the roots of comedy, let's say stand up, the Lenny Bruce days and stuff, it was always in jazz clubs or strip joints, right?
Yeah, basements of jazz clubs, smoky filled basement, nightclubs, 60s era nightclubs is where it came out of, or whatever,
Right. And so that was the roots of the industry, stand-up comedy, and as it's progressed, comedy has changed, the audience have changed, but I think one of the detrimental things is what we're alluding to, and I'm not sure why we're talking about comedy club design, but it's true that today's glass and plastic and in big, everybody wants a 300-seat showroom when, as you pointed out, 80% of the time there's 50 people in the room. But these big showcase rooms, and they're great if you're shooting a TV show or you got a packed house with some name act. But for comedy, the true stand-up comedy, I think you nailed it. There needs to be a comfort level for the audience, and people are more comfortable if it's the room's more like how they live, and people don't live in glass palaces.
No, there was a lady who did, but she just passed away.
To the Queen.
To the Queen.
Yeah, I was out with some buddies and we were toasting the Queen. Well, that's funny you bring that up. Well, Tony, it's we talked about comedy club design and in some of the rooms in San Francisco. You mentioned that you were a regular at the Improv in LA and how the Comedy Magic Club in Hermosa Beach is such a great place to work out comedy. When you as a comic are coming up in your career, did you have to make a lot of adjustments going from San Francisco to LA or from San Jose, your home base, to San Francisco and LA? Did it force you to a certain type of comedy, or were you true to yourself and just got better and better? How would you relate that?
Well, I think that's a good question. And for me, and I think this is maybe more of the case, it happens when you go from where you're used to doing things to do the road for the first time. I think that's where that happens, not the big city, because I think by that time you kind of know more who you are and stuff. But I think, like, I was in San Francisco, and I'd been doing San Francisco. I had even done your room. I did local West Coast things. Then the first time I had got on a plane was to go to, like, San Antonio, Texas for a week, and I remember the MC bringing me out and said, "Oh, the next guy's from San Francisco, Tony Camin." But before I got to the microphone, someone yelled out, "Faggot." Even before I got to the microphone, I'm being heckled in my first show in a state I've never performed in. So, you got to deal with, you're kind of sometimes insular in your scene. You're like, oh, I'm in San Francisco. People like to talk about coffee, or people like to talk this. And so it made me widen my perspective a little bit. Like, oh, not everybody's a liberal. Not everybody doesn't like whoever was president. Whatever the San Francisco mindset is, you have to have like a national mindset, So that happened. My adjustment sort of went from being a cute little San Francisco comic to like, oh, now I'm playing United States. I gotta change. I gotta broaden my horizons a little bit. By the time you get to LA, I think you're hopefully already know yourself a little bit more, where you don't really change. I think the change happens when you start doing the road. I think that's where you really get a lot of different audiences in front of you, Yeah,
to put it a little more succinctly, you're yourself in your hometown. When you leave your town, you have to relate to the audience because they're a different, the people in San Francisco are different than the people in Texas, which are different from the people in Seattle. So you have to engage with that audience. You have to adapt to that audience. And then you kind of find yourself in that universe of where you could play anywhere. Like you're going to be going to England and doing a comedy tour. Those are different audiences. And yet you've already developed that ability to be Tony Camin in a different country, in a different club, in a different area because of your experience on the road.
Yeah, and I think the difficult, challenging part is to like you said, you have your coup, you know who you're yourself. You're not yourself in San Francisco, but you got to, as you expand your act and bring and get it more national or more universal, is to not lose yourself that you initially had. You're still, to see everything through your lens is the challenge. Not to be like, oh, I got to write some wife jokes now that I'm married. It's like you still got to. Hopefully, there's still enough you. There's all still you in there where you compromise, but you don't lose your voice. I think that's the trick, is to stay you, and then also write whatever kind of joke, like and I'm not even at that stage where you can take any issue and make a joke at it through your voice. And I think that really good comics can do that. Your Carlins, your Jake Johans, where they can make everything, and there'll be five. You'll get one issue, 5 different comics. Will be 5 different jokes, and they're all all them stemming from that personality. Like to me, a good headliner, you can say they do this that no one else does. And not everybody fits that thing, but I think a good, really, you're like, oh, that person. Oh, what does he do? He does this. Like whatever it is, they have a solid. With Sebastian or something. Oh, he's an Italian guy, or Slayton's going to be dirty and whatever. You have a thing you're known for,
Right.
You're still you, if that makes any sense,
Well, yeah, every entertainer creates a persona that's different than who they really are, even though it is a lot of who they are. But
it could be exaggeration or it could be a character. Yeah.
Right. And that's the vehicle to bring their comic voice to the audiences. And what we were sharing was that by doing the road and playing different places, you can't just do San Francisco comedy jokes when you're in Texas, and you can't take what you might do in Seattle and bring it to San Francisco and maybe have it work as well. But by working all those places, you find that, I hate to be simplistic, but that generic material that's still you. Then when you get to LA or New York, you're able to relate to any situation and bring your stuff, right?
Yeah, you can, because the material, if you said generic, but it just could be, you could just say universal. Material isn't really generic. You say, okay, let's talk about dating. That's the most boring.
Tony, I apologize. I knew it was a bad term when I said it, but I think universal is a good word.
I know what you meant. Yeah. I know what you meant. Like, it's not like something new and crazy is an interesting topic that's easy to make fun of. Oh, but you say something, I'm dating. You're like, okay, boring is subject. This comic is dating. But if there's someone, I forget who said there's no boring premises, only hack jokes. Every premise isn't boring in itself. It's what you do with it. So I can hear dating jokes that are amazing just today, but we've heard, one of the oldest subjects in the world is I'm dating. But I still hear fresh, funny things. So that, as long as you keep, like, someone does it like emo or something, like no one else can touch, that's who they do it. That's their style. And that's just from growth and doing it a lot, I mean, it's just. That's
so funny. You reference Emo Phillips, which a lot of people wouldn't know, but a very esoteric guy that can take any normal subject and put a twist and kind of a weirdness to it, kind of like Paula Poundstone.
Oh yeah, and they're both still doing it and out there and great. Like Emo, his delivery would get to me after a while because it was so sing-songy. But these jokes are undeniably good. Geez, like all these jokes are he's such a great joke writer,
Well, it's funny
and like you said, through his surreal brain too,
Yeah, and it's interesting because we're talking about Paula and Emo taking things and kind of twisting it, being weird, but it brings to mind that also as a comic performer, It's how you present it. So you have somebody like Stephen Wright, who was just slow-paced joke, joke, joke. And then you have someone like Robin Williams that was machine gun, throwing out so much stuff that there was a high percentage of comedy. And then you got Bobby Slayton, who's kind of the pit bull of comedy and kind of this angry piss guy, but still really hilariously funny. And we've recently lost Bob Saget, but even though he was Danny Tanner on the Full House, Mr. Dad, Mr. Clean, could be absolutely filthy on stage and yet hilarious. So it's also
the
presentation of the comedy material, right? It's such an interesting thing.
Yeah, it's how you deliver it. It's all this stuff, and that you just learn that from you could take the same subject, same joke, and give it to two different people, and one could be horrible and one racist, and one could be like, that's brilliant. It's just how you it's just your skill level. Like I'm really impressed with a lot of younger comics because there's a lot of diversity now in comedy and new comedy. And these comics are doing Muslim, Palestinian, Israeli jokes I'm not political, but I'm like, wow, they made this funny to the whole room, and it's a very difficult tightrope that they're watching, and they're doing it already. So, I'm always impressed by there's so much you can talk about in comedy that, you pick a hard subject and you can still pull that off. I applaud that because, it's like you said, the subjects are out there, and anybody can, and what you take and what you glean, what you see funny in that, it makes you the original,
Yeah, it's an interesting career choice that, more so you than me. As a producer, I just have an appreciation and willing to pay for good talent, but you're the creative side, and you've been so successful, Tony. I mean, your television, the Marijuana Logs, comedy festivals like Just for Laughs. I wish you so much luck on your comedy tour of England. I know that you and Arj Barker have done it before, but I think you'll have a great time. The audiences over there are kind of hungry for entertainment as we're post-COVID. But thank you for taking time to kind of just chat comedy. I think that it's an interesting and fascinating art form, and I always appreciate smart people like you to talk about it.
Oh, yeah. And again, thanks, Scott, because you really kickstarted a lot of stuff for me. And let's get lunch or something next time I'm in SAC.
Oh, that would be great. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. I'm going to share a little stand-up comedy by Mr. Camin. But Tony, just chatting about clubs and the differences between L.A. and San Francisco and going on the road and the basics of comedy. This has been really fascinating. Thanks so much for your valuable time today, Tony.
All right, thanks. Keep in touch, and my best to your better half.
I'll let her know. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. I have some terrific stand-up comedy for you right now.
But I appreciate you guys coming out with the, there's a financial crisis on. I don't know if you guys are aware of it. You guys are out partying, buying all kinds of shots. One guy is. Yeah, party it up, bro. Or ma'am with a weird voice. You never know in New York. Because we are in hard times. My brother, he's a CFO. He's a CAO. He has a job dealing with money. Okay? I don't know if you know what that means. He calls me up. He's like, hey, bro, I just want to give you a heads up. These banks are foreclosing, and you're only guaranteed $100,000 per deposit per bank. So you might want to start moving some stuff around. Yeah. I'm like, well, what? Whoa, back it up. Only $100,000 per bank. That's BS. Thanks for warning me. I gotta go. I gotta start moving some shit around. Not really. I'll be honest with you guys, because I like you. Most of my money is currently tied up in Mach 3 razor refills. And printer cartridges. I believe they call it equity. But then I felt pretty good. The other day I was reading the Wall Street Journal, Dennis' office, and they said that General Motors lost $38 billion last year. $38 billion And I read that and I'm like, geez, I did better than GM last year. Because I made $600, bitches. And that's like 7 Mach 3 cartridges. And you know, it's the problem is not just America, it's worldwide. And you know stuff is bad because things are coming back from the past. Like, pirates are back. That's how you know stuff is bad. Pirates are goddamn back. It's like, what next? Hear about John? What happened? Was he mugged? Mm-mm. Pirates? Mm-mm. Vikings. They pillaged the shit out of him. With that horny hat head thing. You know, and they caught that one pirate, and I would love to be a fly on the wall. I wonder if when he was being integrated at CIA headquarters, if the CIA agent ever realized the absurdity of that meeting. If at any point he's like, hold on a second, I know this is very serious, but hold on a second. It just hit me. You're a pirate. Okay? And I'm a spy. What are we, 5?
That was Tony Camin live on stage. Man, he's such a great guy, an old friend, and he's had such a successful career in stand-up comedy. I appreciate his time just talking about the industry today, and I appreciate you being out there listening to it. Thanks so much. We'll be back with another great show next week. All right? Thanks for listening. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Standup Comedy, your host and MC. For information on the show, merchandise, and our sponsors, or to send comments to Scott, visit our website at www.standupyourhostandmc.com. Look for more episodes soon and enjoy the world of stand-up comedy. Visit a comedy showroom near you.